Okay, so I'm thinking about doing the passenger side fender, front fender on this Porsche 914 Rescue. You guys have been following this build, Rescue, whatever, may remember that I found that there's a ton of Bondo on the front fender passenger side. Let me review that with you. So what I found was, and I doctored it up to go racing, nothing special, wrong colored paint, but this area here is just chock full of Bondo. It was cracking, and when I looked on the inside of the fender, it's dented in. There's probably every bit of an inch body filler right there. Also, there should be a shot line up here, so there's corrosion in there. And Restoration Design actually sells this segment. I think it comes right across here. So anyway, you can replace all that, which is probably going to need. But that involves removing the trim, probably taking the window out, front windshield out, I would imagine. I don't think you want to be in there cutting and stuff with the windshield in place. So anyway, that's a whole nother ball of wax. But this fender will need to be addressed. I don't know if I'm going to get to it right away, but I got a donor part, and this was months ago, this fender here. And I think I paid a couple $100 for it. It's in pretty good shape. It's been dented here, which is sort of the same spot as the one on the car, right? But if you look at the back side, it's been punched out. The holes have been filled. Looks like they filled the holes with a weld. That's good. But then along this top ridge here, it's got this odd dimple. I'm almost wondering if that wasn't dented substantially also, and somebody just got up inside of there and beat it out. Because it's just like dimples all across here. So the fender that's on the car, it's mainly this area here. That's the really bad part. Also on this replacement fender, I've got corrosion down here. So I don't want to use this segment. I think what is most useful is going to be probably from here up. And on the fender that's on the car, I don't think that dent goes any farther than halfway down. So this has got some dimples down here. I mean, you know, when you put this stuff on, there's going to be body work anyway. So I think this is a good donor part. Now, what I did want to show today is how all this kind of goes together from the factory. So you guys getting in there and taking these fenders off have a good idea what you're getting into. The guy that took this fender off, the donor part, he cut, let me show you to you. It's a great spot to cut the fender. He cut along the inside of the inner fender well. And so he went all the way down. He went around the front bulkhead, which actually, I'll save this part here because these front, if you remember on that rescue car, the driver's side, this was all crumpled to hell, and I had to put a donor part on it. So this has value. It'll be useful for somebody, maybe even me, if I get another 914 and it's got the turn signal crumpled. So even if I just take half of this fender and put it on the rescue car, I think I'm ahead of the game. But what I want to do today, again, the guy that sold me the donor part, he just did some real butchery in here. So this has got multiple layers, and I'm going to peel it back because this top segment, I may really need that. If I can mesh that in and get that shot line going again, I just rather not start hacking stuff up. I'm gonna start drilling out spot welds and take this stuff apart in the reverse order that they put it together in the factory. So right now I'm looking at some spot welds right down here. This little layer of metal should peel off. I'm gonna start there and we'll see what's underneath. Okay, as you can see, there's what, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 spot welds. There may be one more right there. There's a bunch. So whatever this part is, because when they cut the donor part off, you can see they went around here. Then there's another layer. There's like 3 layers of metal there. So I don't know if this is part of the driver compartment front bulkhead, could be part of the compartment for the fuel tank, not sure. But if you were trying to repair that area where that shot line is, you would have to go through all that, and I don't know how you would get to it if it was inside of the car. Guess I could open up the, I'd have to pull out the fuel tank to find this spot. I'm not going to do that. So anyway, let me peel that apart and see what we got. Yeah, 3 more spot welds. So that's like 14 spot welds in that one small area. Definitely a very structural part of the chassis. I'll get this thing apart in a second. Okay, so now you can see there's another plate under that piece I just stripped out, which was here. It's all bent. So I suspect that connects to the back of the door jamb, because it's got a piece like that that runs all the way down to the kick panel. So I think that's what he's cut right here. And then this is a factory edge right there. So I think that's part of that flat piece of metal that goes all the way down. I've never dug in that far, so I don't know. I'm just guessing. So now I'm going to peel this piece off. And you can see there's a pressed piece of metal here that's joined on, probably more spot welds to the fender with some body sealer there. That's a really bad rust area. So let me see. I don't think this has another set of spot welds. I'll clean it up with a wire brush and see what's joining it onto this piece. Okay, no additional spot welds, but I did have to go deeper on the existing ones. So when that came out, and as soon as I got through that piece, rust started coming up on my spot weld bit. And so what you're looking at there is the back side of that channel, which is really prone to rust. So next I want to figure out how, because this would be the cowl right? It's a remnant of the cowl. How that laps onto the fender, or is it part of the fender? Can't really tell from this side. There's so much seam sealer, but I'm going to find out how that joins together. If there's welds inside of here, that's going to be really, really hard to undo. I do see 2 layers of metal there. Actually 3 layers. So I got to figure that out. It's a real puzzle. All right, I got in there and dug out a bunch of that seam sealer. So still trying to figure out how this metal is lapped together. It looks like the fender, there is it's probably spot welds right along there. I don't know how I'm going to drill them out. It's going to be really hard. But so that would be the outside edge of this gap. So let me dig around some more in here. So I cut out that curved piece that was here, which I believe is part of the fuel compartment. Actually, no. That would be behind the door. It's really confusing looking at this from upside down. But you can see where at the factory they did seam welds along where those 2 pieces of metal join. And I'm seeing some spot welds down in there as well. So those are going to be a bugger to get to. And then there's some spot welds here. So I'm still peeling back these layers, trying to separate this metal. This would be a real challenge on the car, big time. So, I don't know. Replacing that area by the windshield is going to be very, very hard. Okay, so looking at it from the top side, that channel, you can see it folds over. So folds over and then folds all the way over. So I should be able to separate that. There's spot welds, some of which I've already drilled out. All right, that should separate. The ones I can't get to, actually I ran a grinder along here just to take out the seam welds. So that should separate. And then what's going to happen is that follows right along the inside of the fender. There's a bunch of seam sealer in there. And those welds are going to be along here. That's the channel. The channel is actually 2 pieces of metal. The inner fender and then the fender itself. Okay, I think I got it figured out. So right at the very start of this would be right there by the windshield. Underneath here in that channel is a pretty substantial seam weld. You should be able to get a small cutoff wheel from the top down. I did it from the underside, But if this were on the car, you wouldn't be able to do that because all the other metal in the way. It's starting to separate, but there's another big seam weld in there. Can't get the light down in there. But again, with a long cutoff wheel, you'd be able to get down in there. Because you see, this is the fender. It just turns down from the top down. And that should be the case. I think that's going to change once we get into the channel. The channel is going to curl back up. And you can see that's two pieces of metal there. Alright, got that separated. You can see why this is a problem area. The water's just going down in there. It's got no place to go. It's ridiculous. So, yeah. Of course, with it on the car, you wouldn't be able to pry stuff apart like this. You'd be bending the cowl or the fender. So the next thing will be to go along this channel and take those spot welds out. And hopefully this separate the fender, the outer fender from the inner fender. So I am counting 45 spot welds along that channel. So because I don't have to worry about salvaging this piece, it's already been cut off the car, I'm just going to take a grinder and grind off that lip because I don't want to drill out 45 spot welds. And that should get me down to this area here, which is where the rubber bumper for the front trunk lid mounts. And there's going to be a few more in there. Yeah, this is pretty crazy stuff. Okay, so I got the bulk of that remaining inner fender off. Note that basically what I did is took the grinder in here at a little bit of an angle, and that way you're working that edge, and it has a tendency to cut it off without removing too much material, because you can see there's two pieces there where they overlap. And now I'll take the grinder and just go along the top here and remove that sliver of metal left over. I'm also looking at here, this will be important for you guys that are doing this on the car. There's like a little bulkhead here, and it looks like that's a separate piece of metal. So you have the outer fender here, and then it looks like this bulkhead is folded over to make a triangular piece, okay? And then follows, it's bent over at a 90-degree angle all the way down to here. So where that is crimped, it's actually capturing the bulkhead and the outer fender. Now, if you remember, there was several layers of metal in here, so if you were to trying to replace the whole fender, I don't know how you would access all this. Well, I'm going to go ahead and mess around and remove all the seam sealer in here to see if there's any spot welds at all. If this is just folded over, and this were still on the car, you could potentially just unfold this, and the whole fender outer skin should release. I don't know that I'm going to do that because this is actually holding it kind of rigid. You know, until I decide exactly how much of this I'm going to transplant. But I'll kind of fiddle around in there and clean it up and see exactly what's going on. But yeah, I suspect, because this is definitely 2 layers. You can see like a screw hole here, which is kind of odd because again, there was like 3 pieces of metal, you know, which we assumed were the battery, not the battery compartment, the fuel tank compartment. So I will finish cleaning this up, and then also down here, I don't know how much of this I'm going to do, because really I don't need this front portion, but you could potentially salvage that little bracket. It's spot welded, just looks like 2 or 3 spot welds. And the rest of this is all spot welds. I've dealt with this before on the driver's side. Well, looked at it. So probably not going to mess with that too much. But because I may try to put this back half, splice it into the channel and everything, and especially if there's a lot of corrosion up here on the existing panel, it would behoove me to do that. So let me finish cleaning this up and then we'll reevaluate. Okay, got a bunch of that seam sealer out. It's tough. I mean, I put a heat gun in there and a vibrating scraper, and I got the vast majority of it out of there. So it confirms what I thought. This bulkhead, little bulkhead here, is basically just a stamped piece of metal, and the outer skin folds over it, right, all the way up to here. So in this triangular piece right there by your door and your windshield, you got 2 layers of metal. So you guys that are repairing that area just need to be aware of that. If you're cutting out metal from the top, you want to go super shallow. And I would imagine, because this was part of that shot line, that seam, corrosion would have a tendency to get trapped inside of there. Porsche did put a whole lot of seam sealer, especially on this side. And that's a good thing, because this is the inner part of the wheel well, and all kinds of dirt and water and snow are going to be kicked up in there. But you can still see there's quite a bit of corrosion. So what I can do is, the guy that salvaged this part for me, he cut this right along here, right? And so this is a sliver of probably the back side of the, I don't know, I'd have to look at it. But I can go ahead and drill those out and peel that sliver of extra metal. I'll get rid of this as well. That's, I believe that's part of the body, the tub. And you can see it's 2 pieces of metal also. So I can get rid of that. I'm familiar with this area down here because I've worked, that's part of your outer longitudinal. So I'll finish cleaning this up here and then do a couple more videos of what I found. Hopefully this is going to be useful to somebody. Again, I'm just not sure when I decide to cut into that fender on the rescue car how much of this I'm going to do. It really is going to be driven by this area up here on the rescue car, because if that's got a lot of corrosion, it's going to need to be replaced as well. Yep, quite a bit of corrosion underneath there. But there was one seam weld up here that I had to grind off. The rest of these, it's just peeling up pretty nice. Well, it's because it's rusting. Okay, down here at what I think that's the corner of the tub, there is a pretty substantial seam weld in there that, again, if you were trying to remove this fender from the outside, would be hard to deal with. You'd have to cut off that, and that part of the that piece here, you can see where it laps over. That is actually part of the sill that goes on the passenger door above the longitudinal. So that little section there, yeah, I don't know, you would have to cut that off to get to this, get to that weld there. So in theory, you could put it back on, weld it back on, but yeah, it's just a whole Pandora's box of a puzzle. Right, so I got all that extra metal stripped off, and so if you were able to remove this fender in its entirety, this is pretty much what you would be looking at. You know, you'd have that bulkhead on there. You know, the channel that goes down the trunk would be on there. Now, of course, I stopped down there. I didn't remove that extra metal there, but for this area, this is what you would be looking at. So I'm pretty satisfied. You know, I can work with this back half of this fender. Now, what I have been doing is cleaning it some more, getting all the paint and Bondo off, body filler. And I took a ball peen hammer, and from the inside, I'm just tapping out some of those bigger folds in the metal. And although it leaves smaller dimples, I think it helps it. I don't know, you body guys might chime in on that. But like I said, I'm probably going to cut the thing right here anyway. So, yeah, you can see some of those little dimples right there. But I think you could probably sand those down, or, you know, you could definitely skim it with body filler. But I did strip off that one big patch of body filler here. And you can see that's a pretty good dent there. I might try to tap that out also. So here's the back side, and they definitely used those little wires to pull it out. So it was pushed in pretty good. Just curious if all this kind of happened at the same time, if there was two separate incidences. All I know is those dimples, those bigger dimples, you can see them whenever I get in there with a wire brush or abrasive disc. You can see where the rust is, and the disc is not getting down in there. So it's pretty easy actually to kind of bump them out. I've already bumped out quite a few down in this section. So I think I'll try it on this end, on this bigger dent. And all I'm doing is using this metal plate as a backer, and then flipping this upside down and just tapping it out with a ball peen hammer. So I may be making things worse. I don't know. We'll just keep going and see what it does. Okay, well, battery on my cordless drill kept giving out. Wasn't having enough time to recharge it. So I just stopped this for now. I did put rust kill on the whole fender, let it sit for a good 45 minutes, and then rinsed it off, and then cooked it up with a heat gun, so it's super dry. So I think it's a fairly decent donor part. I mean, it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but Next thing will be to look at the car that I'm fixing and decide where I'm going to cut the metal out. But the main reason I did all this was, one, to prep this donor piece, and two, just to kind of explore how Porsche put these fenders on and what it would take to actually pull the whole fender off. It's pretty intense. So you guys that are going to do that, I hope some of what I did here on this video was helpful. Look for part 2. That's when I'll be starting to cut up the other car. Thanks for watching.